talking
public art.
with us, Louise and Laura from Francis Knight Public Art Consultancy.
Conversations with a range of arts practitioners, community activists, planning directors and design teams about how we can make places better by working with artists.
Our role as public art consultants is all about the delicate balance of client expectations to encourage new ways of seeing, developing relationships, connecting people and enabling the creative process. Today we meet Caroline Hicks. Caroline is Director of Growth and Community for Dartford Borough Council. Her decision to pursue a career in the public sector was driven by the feeling that local services form the bedrock of all our lives.
Being in a position to ensure these services are shaped and delivered in the best possible way, despite dwindling resources, is something that, despite the difficulties, she finds extremely rewarding.
Whether it's creating an event that brings together a community, or pushing forward a brand new cinema development, or responding to protect livelihoods during the pandemic, she's always ready to take on a challenge, collaborate with local people, and make it happen.
That, she says, is what local government is all about. A proud mother of 2 sons, and with her own craft interests and hobbies, Caroline is currently in training for the Great North Run. Welcome, Caroline Hicks.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. This is our Talking Public Art. It's our second series as well. We did one last year and we just kind of thought we'd build on it because they're just, well, we certainly think they're really interesting conversations from different points of view, to be honest. And obviously we've started working with you in Dartford, but actually we were just reminiscing, we met back in the early 2000s, probably. We were both working for the same local authority as part of the arts development team. You were based in the theatre, which was in the High Street, and Laura and I were job sharing as visual arts officers as part of the arts development team. So this was all pre Francis Knight for us.
And it was in the day when local authorities had some money. Do you remember?
Yes, we had good budgets. Yeah, we did.
Yeah. And had arts development teams. I mean, I know we're talking about a local authority that still has one, Medway, but there's not many that have that still. So that was it. They were interesting times. They were quite vibrant times, I think. But now you have a fancy new job with a great title, Director of Growth and Community. So it'd kind of be interesting to know how you got to that job, Caroline. What was your journey?
Well, it was an interesting one, and there was certainly no plan in place for all of it. Back in the day when I first met both of you, I was working in the theatre. Even before then, I'd been working in theatre. I'd been working actually for a pantomime company for a long time.
Oh, fantastic.
That was kind of my first job out of school, if you like, my first proper job. So I spent 5 years going around theatres around the country, being paid to have a laugh, really, which was kind of mad, but yeah, absolutely brilliant. Anyway, a couple of other jobs in between, and ended up in arts marketing in Medway, which I absolutely loved. And we just mentioned then, they were sort of heady days, but we had proper big teams of people with massively different skill sets, putting on everything from visual arts through to spoken word, through to street performances and festivals and theatre and all those kind of things. And so many of the people I met then are the kind of people who've really, were formative in my kind of career. I also met then, and we're good friends now, so it's fine, I can mention this, also met my first husband, you both know, and we had our son. We got married and had our son. And then our marriage didn't last, but I'd left my job by that point to be, maternal stronghold in our family. Anyway, that all went a bit pear-shaped. And so I had to go and get another job, which I duly did, and ended up at another local authority in Canterbury. And
nice
moved
place,
over
Canterbury,
there.
as well.
Beautiful place. And actually, bizarrely, was where I went to nursery school many, many moons ago. So it sort of felt like a bit of a coming home in a way. But I went into Canterbury City Council in a marketing role again, and at that time we had the Tour de France starting in Canterbury that year, the first the Grand Départ of the Tour de France, and so I went into this very different authority to Medway, but with fun and exciting things going on. But I was doing a maternity cover role, which was kind of quite liberating, actually. I could go in, do what I needed to do, frankly, pay the mortgage and all those kind of things. But it wasn't necessarily my sort of where my heart was, I suppose. It had nothing to do with the arts or anything like that. Anyway, 14 years later, I was still at Canterbury, but having worked through a number of roles, actually. And I got more involved in tourism, which actually got quite a lot of crossover with the arts and with heritage and culture, which I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then got more into the economic development side of it, given that Canterbury is a massive tourist destination and therefore its heritage and culture and tourism offer is a fundamental part of its local economy. That then merged with property and all sorts of things, and that's how I've ended up eventually being in a role which is more of a sort of strategic role. I'm in a director role now, but all of those things that bring that stuff together. So I've got planning and events and economic development and property services and all sorts of things like that bring that kind of, in its broadest sense, I suppose, that place-shaping, place-making stuff together. It's a huge role
then, isn't it, Caroline? It's a huge
role. It is, and it touches on all sorts of things. And you know, in that time, I've just moved to Dartford, so I'm 14 months into a role here, which is a completely different place to Canterbury, obviously. But yeah, it's quite interesting how, as you work your way through, you know, a career path, and I always think that's quite a grand word or a couple of words for something that was completely unplanned, and I've just sort of
aren't they the best ways, though? They're the best kind of things, aren't they?
Yeah, you work through from a very sort of operational level and you know, really what's going on and what's going on the ground through to, okay, well, why are we doing this? How can we do this better? How can we tie more in to make the outcome even more, you know, effective or whatever? So yeah, it's been a bit of a random old journey, but an interesting one.
So now that you are at Dartford, I mean, you've kind of started. We've just gone through quite a strange old time yet again, and then there's all sorts of things happening around us now that are strange old times as well. So that kind of really impacted, didn't it, on the public realm, on town centres, on places like that. And I know that when you work at Canterbury, you touched on working for the Canterbury Market, the Makers Market. Can you tell us something a little bit about that and how that came about?
That was, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly when now, but a number of years ago, well before any of us thought a pandemic would be on the way, or even Brexit or any of those other things which have obviously prompted a very big change to our high streets. It just so happened at that point that I had the Canterbury traditional market was sort of under my management, if you like, as well as economic development, etc. We still had some development budgets actually at that point, and we were trying to find a way to do a couple of things actually. One was to try and bring some new people into the established market in Canterbury. You know, the Canterbury market was a very traditional. You know, what you'd expect to see, I suppose, from an old school market. And Canterbury has had a market for many, many years, and I won't go into much more about that because it's quite a controversial subject in Canterbury at the moment, so I'm not gonna engage in that. But at that point, we were trying to get some newer traders onto the market. It's also, as a university and big college town, we knew we had an awful lot of creative people and graduates sort of finishing their time at whichever educational establishment and looking for ways to start their own ideas or start their businesses and what have you. And in a city such as Canterbury, where there are universities in town, graduate retention is a sort of buzzword, a buzz phrase that's always used about how you try and keep those people who've lived and been educated in your space. How do you keep those skills there? And it's there's a dark art, I don't know, but it's something that's impossible to measure.
Well,
it's really hard,
doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's impossible to measure. And there's probably, you could probably guarantee there will be an element of graduate retention anywhere. And life's quite cyclical. People will come back later in life, and all of those kind of things. But anyway, it was born out of those kind of ideas. And we were working or had been in touch with a company called Future Foundry, who do a lot of really interesting things. And Lisa there was really interested in how we could work together in trying to hit all of our outcomes together. And she was very keen on working with young people, building their business skills, building their entrepreneurial skills, and supporting one another in doing that. So we came up with a Thursday market. Boringly in the background, we had to get planning permission to do an extra day on the market and this, that and the other. But we did it in such a way that it was purely for new makers, new creatives, or just young people to try things out. And it really was meant to be a test ground, literally market testing ground. So we opened it not really knowing whether it would work, how long it would last for. We used the infrastructure that we already had for Canterbury Market in so much as, using our gazebos and all of those kind of things, and worked with the various colleges and unis to try and get young people in. Actually, it wasn't even just young people, anyone graduating, to get them to test their ideas. And actually, the opening day, and I've sort of described it a few times, it was a real pilot and it was a real test, but there were performance pieces going on. There were people selling things and testing their products. There was food, there was drink. There was such a kind of buzz. It was almost like a sort of mini festival on the street kind of thing. And it really, for me, showed how a public space can do more than host a thing, more than just be a backdrop, more than just, it's just a market. This was a group of people who, by very design, were there to interact with the people there, the spaces there, the businesses around them. So it just had a bit of an energy that a normal, traditional market hadn't had.
There's a couple of things I could kind of want to pick up on there. One, you talk about the sort of infrastructure, the boring stuff, but it's so important, isn't it, in public realm, that you have access to electricity, that you have a space that's safe, that you have those gazebos, all of those things make it a much easier thing to put up and set up.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and quite so often, and I found this in, obviously I do work in a council setting. Often, people tend to look at things from their particular perspective. So, as a council at that point, we ran markets, we did it week in, week out, we had the structure to do that. But it was a slightly odd thing to say, right, we will use that structure, we will plonk that in to enable someone else to use that space. Because actually, historically, it'd been a bit more, well, if someone wants to do something creative or do something a bit more interesting in our high street, well, they need to come and do it. There was a real separation. And I'm not claiming for a second we were the first to do that or anything, but it was the first time that we'd done that kind of thing in that setting, in that place. And actually being quite bullish about we're doing it with this group of people for a very particular reason. And there was a little bit of kickback from some. Well, isn't that just another normal market day? Just get traders in again. Some people saying that it's a bit cynical. You're just trying to create another way for the council to make money. Well, it wasn't at all. I can assure everyone it didn't make money. But that wasn't the point of it, But it's...
And also for creatives to have that experimental space and test the market without huge business rates and something that's very affordable. And I think... I have listened to Wayne Hemingway a couple of times. I don't know if you've ever heard him talk about how he started out. And it was a market, and it became successful very quickly. And he had to pull his family in to help him produce everything for the orders that started getting from just having a market stall. And it's kind of really important, isn't it?
Well, some of those
ground.
Absolutely. And some of those people... I've seen since trading in, we've got a number of really nice kind of makers spaces and things, or makers retailers in Canterbury. I still live there, but I've seen them at festivals and other events and things since. And that started. We all start somewhere. And so that's I'm quite proud that I still see those faces around.
And I kind of think you were ahead of the curve, weren't you? Because then we kind of went into the pandemic. the high streets have suffered hugely, and people are having to start to think differently about spaces on the high street. Some huge department stores have gone now, leaving big gaps in the high street, and those buildings could just sit empty, or you could invite partners in to collaborate and create a space that's, open to more people to try create projects.
I think it's a different offer, isn't it? It's a different offer to just going and shopping or something like that. So, it's kind of creating something. And I'm interested to know, you say that it was an experiment, and how did the public react to that? Did they embrace that then? Did they?
Yeah, they did. There were a lot more conversations on the street than would be, than we were used to. It didn't carry on forever. I can't. My brain is dreadful these days, but I can't actually remember how long it lasted. But it certainly went on for many months, and there began to be a bit of an expectation of, I wonder what I'll see today. That will be something new, and I think. I mean, it's lovely to say we were ahead of the curve. We were trying something out, it just happened to be where we ended up. But what's been interesting with the pandemic, etc., is I think everybody's expectations have shifted, or what everyone wants from life. But some of that shift was starting to happen before the pandemic. So from town centre perspectives and high streets everywhere, there was far more of a shift from this isn't just a retail experience, this is an experience. And therefore, so many more places were starting to think more along the lines of, what do we add to our space to make it surprising? What do we do in a pop-up kind of sense that's going to make people think, well, I must go back to High Street A because there might be something different there, or
or just to invest in it, isn't it? And just to make it look nicer, actually.
Well, that's it, and that really was starting, before the pandemic, but I think that's really hit home since. And during the pandemic, points in which retailers could do deliveries, or people could pick something up but not go in a shop.
Yeah.
Well, that made people look really differently at the space around them, just in terms of what was within their lease on the high street, or whatever that might be. And some of those things, there's some really positive things that came out of that, which I really hope stick. And on the flip side of that, we had, through government diktat, and rightly so, local authorities had to loosen some of the restrictions on how people traded externally and whatever. Now, don't get me wrong, there was no mean feat for local authorities to, change how they do things, or to change a mindset in such a short space of time. But we did, and there are some real positives. I happened to be in Canterbury the other evening, and the number of businesses now with that kind of cafe culture, seats outside, and I know full well in the background there isn't that same kind of bureaucracy behind it. But that's happened in all sorts of businesses. Many, many moons ago, you would absolutely expect to see a greengrocer with their veg out the front kind of thing. Well, actually, more and more businesses do that. Creative businesses do that. It's a different way to interact with the streetscape, rather than just being the place people walk.
So let's just talk about Dartford a little then. Obviously, we're working with you on a commission, 2 sculptures, one of Mick Jagger and one of Keith Richards, about to be, undergoing, the commissioning process. We have the artist, and we're creating a 1.25 bronze statues, which are going to be located at One Bell Corner in the heart of the High Street. So, an interesting project, one to surprise and delight the Dartford public.
Absolutely, and actually, in terms of pandemic, partway through the pandemic, Dartford just before Dartford, working with KCC, were already embarking on quite a massive programme of town centre works, starting from the pedestrianised main high street through to a number of elements of the project which are more to do with the road network around Dartford. What's happened in Dartford, and lots of people are saying it, we went into lockdown with people thinking that Dartford was one place. And then you come out the end of lockdown, and actually we've spent multi-million-pound, we've had a multi-million-pound project starting to be delivered. It's by no means all the way through yet, but we've had a complete remodelling of of the high street with new granite paving. It looks really lovely. It looks bright. It looks clean. And as part of that, we have this really exciting project. Dartford's son, Mick Jagger. They met my office. Actually, you can't see me, but I can see Dartford Station from where I sit, and that is allegedly where Mick and Keith first met. But yeah, so Dartford's famous sons, and what better way to sort of celebrate that than in a really accessible, in every sense of the word, project with them kind of strutting their way down our high street.
And Caroline, you're pretty accomplished with your career, and so what's the advantage of bringing us in to help with that? I know we're a public art consultancy, but what's the advantage of bringing us in to work with you on that?
Thank you for saying I'm accomplished. I'm not sure that's really true. There we go. The big thing for me is, yes, I work in public sector. I know how councils work, but I wouldn't pretend for a second that I know how the commissioning process in an arts sense works. And I've said it before in other sort of settings, but I think what you guys do, and you do it particularly well, is provide that kind of translation service, if you like, between completely different cultures. And, in most walks of life, we do not shy away from going to specialists to do a thing, to deliver a thing well. And I think I could very happily go and, recruit new members of staff and this, that and the other, but I don't know the first thing about the right kind of approach for this kind of project. But you guys do, and you very clearly and easily steer an organisation like ours through that process in a way that makes sense, actually. So yeah, that's kind of why it works. But it's something, you can see why in these kind of projects sometimes I think people in my kind of position can be a bit fearful of them, because it is a slightly different language. We are dealing with a completely different sector. And you can quite often in these kind of public realm projects get very engineering-y, because you need to be. You do need to be, because you're dealing with literally pavement streetscapes that need to cope with an awful lot. It's quite another skill set to add on top of that. Right, let's make it a beautiful place to feel and be and enthuse about the place. So you're asking for an awful lot quite often from one project manager or one project. So you need the skill sets in there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we are at the stage of soil testing and that sort of thing as well, and having a good team as part of that, because we obviously bring one element to it, which is finding the right artist and commissioning the artist and working alongside them so we get the right piece of work. But it's got to be installed properly. The public realm around it's got to complement everything. So you're kind of working with the design team, the engineers, the local authority, which is the client, and then we have the public expectation as well. So it's quite an interesting setup, isn't it? As you say, there's quite a lot to manage in that sort of commissioning process.
There is, and also, we have all, those of us now working on this particular project we're talking about in Dartford, you've done other projects in other places, and even just in the commissioning process, you mentioned a couple of things about some other projects which we can benefit from. We can learn in Dartford about how that went, and I'm sure you do the same with us. You kind of absorb what's going on, and actually we all want, we're spending public money at the end of the day, and whatever your next public realm job is, if actually that's benefited from something in Dartford, it's all the same pot of money it comes from at the end of the day. So I think the sort of collation of that team is really, really key, and will ultimately lead to just better projects moving forward.
I think that the beauty of this project as well is, we are putting, as you say, some locals, basically. Well, one local. Well, both were local, actually, onto a platform in the middle of Dartford High Street. And this is the first time in some respects that some people will have interacted with public art in a way as well, won't we? Because we are literally going to be putting those two bronze sculptures there, and people will walk past them every day and not realise that they are this public art. We're doing something incredible here. They're not going to have to go and see them or pay to see them or go to a gallery to see them. They are actually going to be in the flesh, life and a quarter. It's a massive thing for Dartford.
Well, that's it. And going back to the word translation I used about, using public art consultancy, there can be a bit of a fear, a bit of a stigma, a bit of a, art. That's a bit scary. I don't know. Yeah, I don't do art. I don't do. Yeah. I mean, there was a, you see things, don't you, about public art projects and hoo-ha about, well, that looks like a something or other, and don't like that. There have been some recently, and I think that there is often or can be a fear about doing something, and people won't like it, or and art, anything like this. What paving slabs we choose for the high street can be subjective. And someone will say, well, I preferred it when it was concrete, or whatever. Those things will always exist, but there's a fear around doing things just in case it prompts a reaction. My view is actually let's prompt a reaction because people are noticing. There's something happening about the space that they're living in day to day that they are noticing. And I love the thought that there will be people walking around One Bell Corner in Dartford. I sort of had this vision of a kind of family, kids say, well, who's that? Well, that's Mick Jagger. What's he doing there? Who's that? If it prompts, one conversation, brilliant. It won't. It'll prompt hundreds of conversations.
Yeah, or even better. Let's meet you by Mick, or,
we've chatted about that before, haven't we? Actually, it's not, public art isn't just stick something on a plinth and go, well, that's done. If a measure of success for me, and I know I've said this to you guys before, is if I overhear somebody saying, no, you take the first left at Mick, and, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I have no doubt it's going to be stunning. I'm so excited to be working on this commission, Caroline. It's such good fun as well. It's lovely working with you on it. We've kind of touched a little bit on challenges, and it's a question that we ask everyone on Talking Public Art. There are niggles and things that we don't particularly like about our sector. We could go on for hours. Is there anything really that, a challenge or something that does really niggle you? Nail it to one if you can.
Yeah, it is sometimes that kind of clash of culture thing. I mean, and I'm not saying anything new. There seems to be a perception from sometimes from a council or developer side of, well, this is a box we've got to tick. Let's try and get it as cheap as possible, but then we've still done it. There's that side of things. But the flip side is also, I've come across some practitioners who kind of think there's just an open checkbook and I can do what I like for art's sake here because it's for the public good and it should be done. Well, neither of those things are 100% true. There's on every project there's a somewhere in the middle. It's a bit tedious getting to that somewhere in the middle because it's always a bit different, and you always go through kind of similar kinds of brokerage to get there.
And I think advocacy as well, actually, because I think part of our role is always to come in, and sometimes we are working with a team that have never done it before, have never commissioned, would never work with an artist, and that, either we get
expectations, don't they, Louise? They kind of think it's going to be about one thing, and actually it's not. It's quite straightforward.
But also it can go to the bottom of the list. And we've said this many times. We've sat at design team meetings, and generally public art will sit on the bottom of the agenda. We're like, if you could just put us to the very top,
we can have a conversation about everything then.
Yes, it kind of influences everything, because I think, when you're installing a piece of public art, like we are in Dartford, it's not just the artwork which is hugely considered, it's the whole environment around it. So the artist is involved in where it's located with the engineer. We're looking at the foundations, we're looking at the backdrop, we're looking at the access around the piece, we're looking at how it's going to be viewed, from what angle. You're looking at the materials that you're using. So it just kind of adds this extra level of detail, which a lot of people kind of find irritating in a design team. But it's so crucial, and at the end of the day, it makes a big difference to then, when you stand back, it's been viewed with so much consideration and thought that it's, that reflects
Absolutely.
In the piece and the environment.
And I think with a project like this, no one actually, when they finally see it, should really think about what went behind the scenes or those conversations that happened. Actually, if people are thinking, oh, why did it go there? Maybe we've missed something. Maybe we've got something wrong in that whole process. One of the really early on in my career, and I think it was before you started at Medway Law, I can't remember, but and I can't remember his surname, Louise, there was an artist called Stephen who did a project about using the mud from the River
Stephen
Medway.
Turner.
Oh,
Stephen
yeah,
Turner,
Stephen
that's it.
Yeah.
Now, that was one of the first visual arts exhibitions that I had worked on. But it has still stuck in my mind, although, not all the names because my brain is a bit rubbish these days. But, the whole experience of that, there is an artist who goes through a process and goes through a creative process to achieve what he's doing. And we had conversations at the time about how to tell that story, how to market it slightly crudely to the public to make that kind of make sense. And it's stuck in my mind in that we talked at the time about there's an artist doing what they do, we're a team of people doing what we do, public will be coming in and out of libraries, going into the gallery, doing what they do. Actually, how do you connect those things and how do you make that a sort of cohesive kind of piece? And that has stayed with me throughout my career. And you get to a project like this, and actually there are probably even more moving parts that all need to understand each other or talk to each other or get through a process to get to this is the final piece, and this is how we tell that story, and this is how people are likely to engage and whatever. And it's huge. And that's quite a big process.
And it's the artist that kind of brings the magic. When they tell their story, when they talk about how they work, and certainly with the artist we've appointed for Dartford, when she came to interview, we were all kind of taken aback after her interview, weren't we? We're pretty unanimous in appointing because her energy was there, the skill was there, clearly, the track record was there, which is all things we're going to be looking for. But there was that bit of magic that she brought into it as well, that you're like, yes, actually, this will translate into the artwork, and we'll work with that,
And there's something there about the process of working with people like you as well. From a purely bureaucratic procurement point of view, it's actually really hard to capture that magic bit in how you ever score something, or how do you give points in a scoring process to wow. That is just a hard bit, and that's partly what we're doing in having you guys and working in it, because you're better at that kind of stuff. Actually, you read the room in that actual conversation. You read the room. We then talked it through, and we had a robust mechanism for how we went through that sort of scoring commissioning process. But you helped us measure wow.
That's great.
Well, the wow will continue, hopefully, when we can see it in the flesh.
So another question we ask is, what sort of public rail project would you love to do but have never had the opportunity to do so yet?
Well, this is something I'd like to do, but I think would absolutely scare the pants off me if it ever happened. A frustration in anything that I've worked on, there are always parameters. And, sometimes that can be quite helpful. It helps to sort of shape what you're doing or stops you going off into flights of fancy about what you could do. But actually, I've got to kind of harbour
go into flights of fancy, go on.
Yeah, just right. You start from a utopian position of, here's a completely blank canvas. What do we want to do with this place? And how do we want it to perform in its broadest sense? What do we want to do in the place? Blah, blah, blah. Starting from absolutely nothing with an unlimited budget, I should say that as well. That'd be great, wouldn't it? And I think it would be a terrifying process, because you'd have to, how you actually deliver something would be difficult, because you could get into, well, we could do this. Or when do you stop? When do you say, right, actually, let's break some concrete, let's get on with something? But it's that kind of thing. At every project you do, there's always something that you think, bit of a shame we couldn't quite do that bit, or a bit of a shame that we were, hampered by such and such or whatever. So yeah, it might be a bit of a case of careful what you wish for, I think. But
yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we need parameters, don't we? I think that's the conclusion we've come to. But they have to be stretchy parameters so that we can still do something.
And sometimes parameters prompt a conversation and
They very much
get
do,
you
yeah.
working through something. And to be fair, there's me saying my utopia would be, blank canvas. How often have we all sat in front of a blank bit of paper and gone,
Yeah, that's quite scary, actually. I was just about to say, that's the scary...
We need a thread. We need a thread. We need something just to kind of push it in a direction.
Because, ultimately, we're always having conversations with clients about, if you could just do this, or, the reason we've done that, or the reason the artist wants to do this. So there's always that engagement. There's always that conversation to be had. And because, and it's talking about that wow moment. You have that moment where the client goes, oh, yeah, I get it. I get it now.
But it is, going back to that sort of blank bit of paper thing, though, the timeline of any of these projects is always quite important, because actually the end result is you're trying to get something done and you're doing it for certain reasons. But actually, if that wow moment doesn't happen, or the point that you can really cement what you're trying to do, I mean, we have all, and could probably all cite things that we've seen where you think, that project kind of lost the plot a little bit, or that didn't quite, that doesn't quite gel for whatever reason. And I think, working through this kind of project, I'm so excited about the statues here. I think they're going to be fabulous. But it comes from I hate this word, but it comes from an authentic place. There is a reason for us doing this and them being here. We've got an artist who is clearly passionate about it and we're going to work really well with. And it's just, great, yeah. But actually, if we'd not had that experience, if we were sort of doing a bit of a slightly cynical, well, let's wedge something in here and it's not really gelling, it's quite a brave thing to at some point say, actually, should we not do this? This might not work,
I agree.
But
there has to be room for that as well, I think, actually. Yeah.
And this one final question we always ask as well. Can you tell us at least one little known fact about yourself?
Well, it was published over the weekend.
Oh,
this.
Okay. I missed it. Sorry.
I am. Well, it was published in a very small way. No one's really gonna notice. But I have a little sideline, which actually all of my friends know that I have. In early first lockdown, I was going slightly insane at home with my two boys, who I loved to bits, but good Lord, we were not meant to be in the same house 24 hours a day.
I think a lot of people came to that conclusion.
Absolutely. And actually, working from home and also homeschooling and all those kind of things, I needed a creative and sane outlet. So I started doing glass fusing. I bought myself a kiln, and my conservatory is now my studio.
Caroline, this is very beautiful.
And in October, my studio is going to be open as part of the East Kent Open Houses programme.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Well, we're definitely coming to that then.
I have to say, I'm about 60% terrified and 40% excited at the moment, but let's keep in touch about
that's a good ratio
changes.
I think you have to be frightened every day about something. I think that's good. Oh, that's really, good for you.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. I did know you do a few craft markets, don't you? So I knew that.
I do sell stuff, and it's lovely just chatting to people. Going back to that makers market thing, there's nothing like having that kind of interaction with people. But the thought of people coming into actually my space, and it is my haven. The children aren't allowed in the conservatory. It's my space. The dog may come in, but the children know. Glass of wine, my safe space, but I'm letting people in.
Yeah, that's very brave. Good on you. Well done.
And just really interesting that with such a big role that you have, that strategic role, that you kind of tap into that creative side.
You need it.
Because, that your working weekday must be quite full on, I'm assuming, and that you have this creative outlet that, you can just channel different energies into.
Absolutely. And actually, all day, every day, I love my job, but it is hard work. And it is thinky. And it's, at my level, I have to make decisions, and you have to make a call on things day in, day out, and lead and take ownership of those things. my head also needs the time to just go off on its own little, whatever route it wants to follow that evening. So I will, as I say, joking aside, take a glass of wine into my conservatory and tinker and play. And it's partly creative, it's partly event, there's a bit of science in there as well, because I like experimenting and seeing what happens. I've had more disasters than I've had successes. I don't, but actually it's all a success because it gives me a headspace that I don't get in any other way.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I could kind of see why then that this Dartford project that we're working with you on is kind of a real interest as well, isn't it? From your background, from your, working within theatre, arts development team, some visual arts, Makers Market. You can kind of see it all come together, really. Yeah. It's really good. Oh, thank you, Caroline. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
It's been,
Pleasure.
Been really interesting, and we look forward to the coming months.
And I can't wait for the unveiling next year.
Oh,
yes.
Very exciting.
Absolutely. Oh, it's really good to talk
Thank
to
you
you.
so much.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Engaged, creative, curious, courageous and valued, Francis Knight is an award-winning independent public art consultancy based in South East England with over 16 years' experience offering expert advice and management in commissioning high-quality art for the public realm. As co-founders and directors of the business, Louise Francis and Laura Knight commission professional artists from across the UK to create ambitious public realm artworks in a variety of locations. The consultancy partners closely with housing developers, design teams, social housing associations and local authorities, together with a wide range of community groups, to create brave, ambitious, thought-provoking art for public spaces.
Over this series of podcasts, we will be looking at different ways that developers can engage with artists as part of a design team, and how, if it's done right, these working relationships can lead to meaningful, lasting and joyous contributions to our townscapes and landscapes.
In our next episode, we talk to artists Nicole Mollett and Josie Den Hartog about the rewards of community engagement and tapping into local knowledge, making things that people can use in their everyday lives, a shared love of books and drawing, and the importance of trust and letting artists do their job.
Plus, fountains and follies, grotesques in old churches, and a stuffed cat called Wilhelm.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you could rate, review, and subscribe to our podcasts. It helps us spread the word on demystifying public art.